The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the dusty general store, and Helena Kimball stepped down into the July heat of Dodge City, Kansas, clutching a carpetbag that held everything she owned in this world. Her heart already resigned to a lifetime of solitude after what her former fiancé had done to her reputation back in Philadelphia. It was 1878, and the frontier town sprawled before her like a promise she no longer believed in. Wooden buildings lined the wide dirt street, their false fronts reaching toward a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Cattle lowed in distant pens, and the smell of dust and manure mingled with the acrid scent of coal smoke from the railroad depot. Helena had traveled for 3 weeks to reach this place, answering an advertisement for a schoolteacher that had appeared in the Philadelphia Inquirer. She had no family left, no prospects, and a scandal attached to her name that made marriage an impossibility. Teaching children on the frontier seemed like the only path forward for a woman of 23 with a ruined reputation through no fault of her own. She adjusted her navy traveling dress, now covered in a fine layer of dust despite her best efforts, and looked around the bustling street. Cowboys on horseback trotted past, their spurs jingling. A woman in a faded calico dress swept the boardwalk in front of a millinery shop. Somewhere in the distance, a piano played an off-key tune, probably from one of the many saloons she had been warned about. Miss Kimball, a portly man with spectacles, approached her, his hand extended. "I'm Theodore Winters, head of the school board. Welcome to Dodge City." Helena shook his hand, managing a small smile. "Thank you, Mr. Winters. I am grateful for the opportunity. Let me show you to your lodgings. The school board has arranged a room for you at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. It is respectable and clean, I assure you. School does not begin for another month, but we thought you might appreciate some time to settle in and familiarize yourself with the town." As they walked down the boardwalk, Helena noticed a man across the street leaning against a hitching post. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled out his worn blue shirt, and a black hat pulled low over his eyes. Even from a distance, she could see he was watching her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. She looked away quickly, following Mr. Winters toward a 2-story building at the edge of town. The boarding house was indeed clean, though sparse. Her room contained a narrow bed, a washstand, a small wardrobe, and a single window that overlooked the street. After Mr. Winters left, Helena sat on the bed and allowed herself a moment of uncertainty. What was she doing here, thousands of miles from everything familiar? But then she remembered Thomas Fairchild's face when he had told her he could not marry her, not after the rumors his business partner had spread about her supposed indiscretions. Never mind that they were complete fabrications, designed to punish her for rejecting that same partner's advances. In Philadelphia society, the truth mattered less than appearances, and Helena's reputation had been destroyed as effectively as if the lies had been true. She stood and unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 other dresses in the wardrobe and placing her books on the small table by the window. She had brought her favorite volumes of poetry, a Bible that had belonged to her mother, and several textbooks she hoped would be useful in teaching. As she worked, the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that she had never seen in the smoke-filled skies of Philadelphia. The next morning, Helena rose early and ventured out to explore the town. She needed to find the schoolhouse and purchase a few necessities. The general store was already open when she arrived, and she stepped inside to find it crowded with goods of every description. Bolts of fabric, farming implements, canned goods, and penny candy filled every available surface. "Can I help you, miss?" The clerk was a young man with slicked back hair and an eager expression. I need some writing paper and ink, please, and perhaps some soap." As he gathered her items, the door opened behind her and she heard the jingle of spurs. She did not turn around, focusing instead on the clerk, but she felt the presence of someone behind her, waiting patiently. "That will be $1.20, the clerk said. Helena counted out the coins carefully, aware that she needed to make her small savings last until she received her first payment from the school board. As she gathered her packages, she finally glanced at the person behind her and found herself looking into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. The man from yesterday stood there, hat in hand, his dark blonde hair slightly disheveled. Up close, she could see he was perhaps 27 or 28, with a strong jaw and weathered skin that spoke of years spent outdoors. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, kind eyes that seemed at odds with his rough appearance. "Morning, madam," he said, his voice low and respectful. He stepped aside to let her pass. "Good morning," Helena replied stiffly, hurrying past him and out into the morning sunshine. She did not know why his polite greeting had flustered her so much, but she felt her cheeks burning as she walked quickly back toward the boarding house. Over the next few days, Helena settled into a routine. She visited the schoolhouse, a small building on the edge of town that needed cleaning and organizing. She spent hours scrubbing desks and washing windows, preparing for the arrival of her students. In the evenings, she took walks around town, carefully avoiding the rougher establishments, and tried to memorize the names and faces of the people who would be part of her new life. And everywhere she went, she seemed to encounter the cowboy with the blue eyes. He was at the general store when she bought supplies. He was riding past when she walked to the schoolhouse. He was sitting on the bench outside the boarding house one evening when she returned from her walk. Each time he tipped his hat respectfully and sometimes offered a quiet greeting, but he never tried to engage her in conversation or approach her inappropriately. Still, Helena found his constant presence unsettling. The last thing she needed was attention from a man, any man. She had come here to be alone, to build a life that did not depend on male approval or society's judgment. On Sunday, she attended church services in a small chapel that doubled as a community meeting hall. The congregation was a mix of townspeople, ranchers, and their families. She sat in the back, hoping to go unnoticed, but after the service, several women approached her with welcoming smiles. "Miss Kimball, we are so pleased to have a new teacher," said a woman who introduced herself as Margaret Peterson. "My 2 boys will be in your class. I do hope you will be firm with them. They can be quite rambunctious." "I look forward to meeting them," Helena said, meaning it. Children, at least, would not judge her for things she had not done. "You must come to dinner next Sunday," Margaret insisted. "We live just outside of town on a small ranch. Nothing fancy, but we would love to have you." Helena accepted, touched by the kindness. Perhaps Dodge City would offer her the fresh start she so desperately needed. As she left the church, she nearly collided with someone on the steps. Strong hands caught her arms, steadying her, and she looked up to find herself face to face with the blue-eyed cowboy. "Careful there, madam," he said, releasing her immediately. "Did not mean to startle you." "You did not," Helena lied, stepping back. "Thank you." She expected him to move on, but instead he stood there, turning his hat in his hands. Finally, he spoke. "I am Graham Everett, madam. I work at the Circle T Ranch about 5 miles west of town. I have been meaning to introduce myself properly, seeing as how we keep running into each other." Helena did not know what to say. His manner was so earnest, so different from the smooth social graces of the men she had known in Philadelphia. There was something genuine about him that both attracted and frightened her. "I am Helena Kimball," she said finally, "the new school teacher." "Yes, madam," I heard. "That is good for the town. We need more education out here." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "I was wondering if you might allow me to walk you back to your boarding house. It is not far, but there are some rough characters around on Sundays after the saloons open." Everything in Helena wanted to refuse. She had promised herself no entanglements, no dependencies. But the walk was only a few blocks, and his concern seemed genuine rather than presumptuous. "Very well, Mr. Everett, thank you." They walked in silence for a moment, the church bells still echoing across the town. Finally, Graham spoke. "How are you finding Dodge City, Miss Kimball?" "It is very different from Philadelphia," she said carefully, "but the people have been welcoming. Philadelphia, that is a long way to come." "You have family there?" "No, no family anywhere." The words came out more harshly than she intended, revealing more than she wanted to share. Graham glanced at her but did not press. "I am sorry to hear that. Family is important, though I suppose we make our own families out here sometimes. Folks we choose to care about." They reached the boarding house too quickly. Helena had surprised herself by almost enjoying the brief conversation. Graham Everett did not pry or make assumptions. He simply walked beside her and talked about ordinary things in a way that felt comfortable. "Thank you for the escort, Mr. Everett," she said formally. "My pleasure, Miss Kimball. Perhaps I will see you around town." "Perhaps." She went inside, watching from her window as he mounted a bay horse and rode off toward the west. Something about the straight line of his back, and the easy way he sat in the saddle, made her chest tighten with an emotion she could not name. The following week passed in a blur of preparation. Helena received a list of her students, 18 children ranging from ages 6 to 14, and began planning lessons. She also received her first month's salary, a modest amount that nonetheless gave her a sense of independence and security she had not felt in a long time. On Wednesday afternoon, as she was leaving the schoolhouse, a sudden summer storm rolled in from the west. The sky darkened within minutes, and the first fat raindrops began to fall. Helena had no umbrella, and the boarding house was a 15-minute walk away. She started running, but within seconds the rain became a deluge, soaking through her dress and plastering her hair to her face. She was halfway to town when she heard hoofbeats behind her. Graham Everett rode up beside her, leading a second horse. "Miss Kimball, please let me give you a ride," he shouted over the sound of the rain. Pride made her want to refuse, but practicality won out. She was already soaked, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. Graham dismounted and helped her onto the second horse, his hands firm but respectful. Then he swung back onto his own mount and led both horses toward town at a careful pace. By the time they reached the boarding house, Helena was shivering despite the summer heat. Graham helped her down and walked her to the door. "You should get into dry clothes right away," he said, water dripping from the brim of his hat. "Do not want you catching a chill." "Thank you, Mr. Everett. I appreciate your assistance." Her teeth were chattering now. "It was nothing." He hesitated, then added, "Miss Kimball, I hope you do not think I am following you around or anything improper like that. It is just a small town, and our paths keep crossing natural-like." Helena looked at him, really looked at him, and saw nothing but sincerity in his face. "I do not think that, Mr. Everett. You have been nothing but kind." His smile transformed his face, making him look younger and almost boyish. "I am glad to hear it. You take care now." She went inside and changed into dry clothes, her mind whirling with confusion. She had promised herself she would never trust a man again, never allow herself to be vulnerable. But Graham Everett's patient kindness was wearing down her defenses in a way she had not anticipated. Sunday came, and Helena made the journey to the Peterson ranch in a wagon driven by Margaret's husband, John. The ranch was modest, as Margaret had said, but well kept and clearly the product of hard work. The couple's two boys, ages 8 and 10, were indeed rambunctious, but also bright-eyed and curious. Over a dinner of roast chicken and fresh vegetables, Helena found herself relaxing more than she had in months. "You seem happier here than in the city," Margaret observed as they washed dishes together after the meal, "if you don't mind my saying so." "I am finding that frontier life suits me," Helena admitted. "There is a directness to it that I appreciate. People say what they mean." "Mostly," Margaret agreed with a laugh. "Though we have our share of gossips and troublemakers, same as anywhere. But folks out here tend to care more about what you do than what people say about you. If you work hard and treat people right, that matters more than any past mistakes." Helena wondered if Margaret somehow knew about her history, but the other woman's face showed only friendly interest. Perhaps she was simply stating a general truth about frontier life. As John drove her back to town that evening, they passed a group of cowboys heading in the opposite direction, returning to their ranch after a day off. Helena recognized Graham among them, and he touched his hat brim as they passed. She found herself watching over her shoulder until the riders disappeared into the dusk. August arrived with blistering heat. The prairie grass turned brown, and dust devils danced down the main street of Dodge City. Helena opened the schoolhouse on the first Monday of the month to find 18 nervous children and their parents waiting. She had prepared carefully for this moment, but she still felt a flutter of anxiety as she called the roll and began her first lesson. The children were eager to learn, though their levels of education varied widely. Some could barely read, while others were working through advanced arithmetic. Helena quickly adapted, creating groups and tailoring lessons to each student's needs. By the end of the first week, she fell into bed each night exhausted but satisfied. On Saturday, she was in the general store buying chalk and slate when Graham approached her. It was the first time he had done more than greet her from a distance in several weeks. "Miss Kimball, I hope you do not mind my asking, but how is the teaching going?" "It is going well, thank you. The children are wonderful." "I am glad to hear it." He shifted his weight, clearly working up to something. "Miss Kimball, there is a dance next Saturday night at the community hall. It is a social event, very respectable, with families and such. I was wondering if you might allow me to escort you." Helena's immediate instinct was to refuse, but as she opened her mouth to make a polite excuse, she realized she did not want to refuse. Graham had been nothing but patient and kind for the past 6 weeks, never pushing, never demanding anything from her. He had respected her obvious desire for distance while still offering friendship and assistance when needed. "I am not sure that would be appropriate, Mr. Everett," she said slowly. "I am the schoolteacher, and people might talk." "They will talk whether you go with me or go alone or stay home," Graham said with a small smile. "That is the nature of small towns. But if you go with me, at least you will have someone to dance with who will not step on your toes." Much. Despite herself, Helena laughed. It was the first real laugh she had allowed herself since arriving in Dodge City. "You make a compelling argument, Mr. Everett. Does that mean yes?" She took a breath, feeling as though she stood on the edge of a precipice. "Yes, but just as friends, you understand." "Just as friends," he agreed, though his smile suggested he hoped for more eventually. "I will call for you at 7 o'clock." The week passed slowly. Helena found herself thinking about the dance more than she should, worrying about what to wear, how to act, what people would think. She had only 2 good dresses, and neither seemed quite right. Finally, she splurged on some blue ribbon at the general store and used it to trim her better dress, a simple gray cotton that brought out the green in her eyes. Saturday evening arrived warm and clear. Helena dressed carefully, pinning her dark brown hair into a simple style that she hoped was neither too formal nor too casual. When Graham knocked on her door at precisely 7 o'clock, she found him transformed. He wore clean black trousers, a white shirt, and a string tie. His hair was neatly combed, and he smelled faintly of soap and bay rum. "You look beautiful, Miss Kimball," he said simply, offering his arm. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Everett." They walked to the community hall together as the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold. Helena could feel eyes watching them from windows and doorways, could imagine the conversations that would happen over breakfast tables tomorrow. But with Graham's steady presence beside her, she found she did not care as much as she had expected. The hall was already crowded when they arrived. A small band consisting of a fiddle, a guitar, and a piano played lively tunes in one corner. Tables laden with food lined one wall, and people of all ages filled the space, talking and laughing. Margaret Peterson waved from across the room, and Helena waved back, grateful for at least one friendly face. "Would you like some punch?" Graham asked. "Yes, please." While he went to fetch drinks, Helena stood near the wall trying to look comfortable. Several people nodded to her, and she recognized most of her students' parents. A few women smiled warmly, but others whispered behind their hands, their gazes flicking between Helena and Graham's retreating back. "You are the new teacher." A woman appeared at Helena's elbow, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp. She was perhaps 40, with graying blonde hair and a stern expression. "I am Beatrice Holloway. My daughter Emily is in your class." "Yes, of course. Emily is doing very well. She has a gift for mathematics." "She had better be doing well, considering what the school board is paying you." Beatrice looked Helena up and down. "I must say, I am surprised to see you here with Graham Everett. He is a good man, from a decent family. I would hate to see him become the subject of gossip." The words were like a slap. Helena felt her face burn, but she kept her voice level. "I assure you, Mrs. Holloway, my conduct is entirely proper. Mr. Everett was kind enough to offer his escort so I would not have to attend alone. Of course." Beatrice's tone suggested she believed no such thing. "I suppose we shall see. A woman's character reveals itself in time." She walked away, leaving Helena feeling sick. So it was going to be like Philadelphia all over again. The whispers, the judgment, the constant scrutiny. She had been foolish to think she could escape her past simply by traveling west. Graham returned with 2 cups of punch and immediately noticed her distress. "What happened?" "Nothing. Just a conversation with one of the parents." He looked around the room, his jaw tightening. "Was it Beatrice Holloway? I saw her talking to you. It does not matter." "It does matter." He set down the cups and faced her squarely. "Miss Kimball, Helena, if I may, I do not know what brought you out here from Philadelphia. I do not know what you are running from or what you think you need to hide. But I can see it in your eyes sometimes, this fear that people are going to judge you or find you wanting. And maybe some of them will. Beatrice Holloway is the town's biggest gossip and self-appointed moral authority. But most folks here are good people who care about what is real, not what is rumored." Helena looked at him, surprised by his perceptiveness. "You do not know anything about me, Mr. Everett. I know you are kind to children. I know you work hard. I know you have a sadness about you that makes me want to find whoever put it there and make them answer for it." He paused. "And I know I would like to get to know you better, if you will let me. Not because I want something from you, but because I think you are someone worth knowing." The band struck up a waltz and couples moved onto the dance floor. Graham held out his hand. "Will you dance with me?" It was a test, Helena knew. If she refused, if she let Beatrice Holloway's words drive her back into her shell, she would be alone forever. But if she accepted, If she allowed herself this small pleasure, she might be opening a door she had sworn to keep closed. She placed her hand in his. Yes. Graham led her onto the floor with a confidence that surprised her. He was a good dancer, moving with a natural rhythm that made it easy to follow his lead. They waltzed in silence for a moment, and Helena felt something inside her begin to relax. The warmth of his hand on her waist, the steadiness of his gaze, the simple pleasure of moving to music, it all combined to create a moment of unexpected happiness. "You dance well," she said. "My mother insisted all her children learn." She said civilization required certain skills, even on the frontier, he smiled. "I thought it was foolish at the time, but I am grateful now. You have brothers and sisters, 2 brothers and a sister, all older. They have their own ranches now, scattered across Kansas and Colorado. My parents passed a few years back and we sold the family place, divided the proceeds. I used my share to buy into the Circle T as a partner. So you are not just a cowboy." "I am a cowboy who owns part of a cattle operation," he said with a grin. "Not quite as romantic, I suppose." "I think it is admirable, building something of your own out here." The dance ended, but Graham did not immediately release her. "Would you like to step outside for some air? It is getting warm in here." They walked out onto the porch that ran along the front of the hall. The night air was cool and pleasant after the stuffiness inside. Stars filled the sky in a way Helena had never seen in the city, thousands upon thousands of them scattered across the darkness. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "It never gets old," Graham agreed. "Even after all these years, I still sometimes just stop and look up, amazed by it all." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Graham spoke quietly. "Helena, you do not have to tell me anything you do not want to. But I want you to know that nothing you could say would change my opinion of you. I am a pretty good judge of character and I see who you are." Helena felt tears prick her eyes. The kindness in his voice was almost more than she could bear. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you being so nice to me?" "Because I think you need a friend. And maybe because I am hoping that friendship might grow into something more in time." He turned to face her. "I am not asking for any promises. I am just asking you to give me a chance to show you that not all men are whatever men you have known before." The tears spilled over and Helena angrily wiped them away. "I was engaged," she said abruptly. "Back in Philadelphia. To a man I thought loved me. But his business partner wanted me, and when I refused his advances, he spread terrible rumors about me, lies about my virtue and my character. Thomas, my fiancé, believed the rumors over my denials. He broke our engagement publicly, thoroughly destroying any hope I had for a respectable marriage. My parents were already gone. I had no other family, and the scandal made it impossible to find any kind of work. So I came here, hoping to start over where no one knew me or cared about Philadelphia society." Graham listened without interrupting, his face grave. When she finished, he reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "That Thomas fellow is a fool and a coward," he said firmly. "And the other man is worse than a snake. You did nothing wrong, Helena, nothing. And anyone who judges you for lies told by wicked men is not worth your concern. But people will talk, Graham. They already are. Mrs. Holloway made that clear. Let them talk. I know the truth, and that is what matters. And folks here will come to know it too in time by watching how you live your life." He smiled slightly. "Besides, I have pretty thick skin. A little gossip does not bother me much." Helena looked at him, this patient, kind man who was offering her something she had thought lost forever, the possibility of being known and accepted for who she really was. "I do not know if I can do this," she admitted. "I am scared." "I know, but being scared does not mean you have to be alone." He offered his hand again. "Come on. Let us go back inside and dance some more. Show Beatrice Holloway and anyone else that you have nothing to hide and nothing to be ashamed of." They danced 3 more times that evening, and Graham made sure Helena met more of the ranching families and townspeople. He introduced her with obvious pride, and his confidence seemed to give others permission to be friendly. By the time he walked her home at 11 o'clock, Helena felt lighter than she had in months. "Thank you," she said as they stood outside the boarding house, "for everything, for being patient with me. You are worth being patient for." He tipped his hat. "Good night, Helena. May I call on you next Sunday afternoon? Maybe we could take a ride out to see some of the countryside. I would like that." His smile was radiant. "Then I will see you Sunday." Helena watched him walk away, his boots echoing on the wooden sidewalk. Something had shifted tonight. Some wall inside her had begun to crack. She was still afraid, still uncertain, but for the first time since arriving in Dodge City, she felt the stirring of hope. The next weeks fell into a pattern that became increasingly precious to Helena. She taught during the week, pouring her energy into her students and finding deep satisfaction in watching them learn and grow. On Sundays after church, Graham would call for her, and they would spend the afternoon together. Sometimes they rode out to see the vast prairie. Other times they simply walked around town or sat on the boarding house porch and talked. Graham was an easy companion. He never pushed her for more than she was ready to give, content to let their relationship develop naturally. He told her about his childhood on his parents' ranch, about learning to ride and rope and work cattle. He spoke of the harsh winters and dry summers, of prairie fires and stampedes, of the raw beauty and danger of frontier life. And slowly, carefully, Helena began to share her own stories. She told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about her father's bookshop and her mother's love of music. She shared memories of school and friends, of dreams she had once held for her future. "I wanted to teach even then," she said one afternoon as they sat by a creek about 3 miles from town. Graham's horse and the gentle mare he always borrowed for her grazed nearby. But in Philadelphia, that would have meant a position at a girls' academy, teaching deportment and French to wealthy daughters. Here, I feel like I am making a real difference. These children need education to build their futures. You are making a difference, Graham assured her. I have heard parents talking in town. They are impressed with how much their children are learning. September brought cooler weather and the beginning of harvest season. Graham was busier with work at the ranch, but he still made time for Sunday visits. Helena found herself looking forward to those afternoons with an intensity that both pleased and frightened her. She was falling in love with Graham Everett, slowly but surely, despite all her resolutions to remain alone. One Sunday in late September, Graham arrived at the boarding house with a picnic basket and a particular gleam in his eye. "I want to show you something," he said mysteriously. They rode east this time, toward a line of low hills that Helena had noticed from town. The land rolled in gentle swells, covered in drying grass that whispered in the wind. After about an hour, Graham guided them to the top of a rise and stopped. Below them, a small valley opened up, greener than the surrounding prairie thanks to a spring-fed creek that meandered through the center. A few cottonwood trees provided shade, and the land looked fertile and protected. "This is my land," Graham said quietly, 320 acres. "I filed a claim on it 2 years ago and have been making improvements slowly. I want to build a house here someday, start my own ranch separate from the Circle T." Helena looked at the valley with new eyes, seeing it as Graham must see it, not just empty land but the foundation of a future. "It is beautiful. I think so." He dismounted and came to help her down. Come on, I will show you where I plan to build. He led her to a spot near the creek where the ground rose slightly, providing a natural view of the valley and protection from flooding. The house would face east to catch the morning sun. Big windows, so there would be plenty of light, and a porch all the way around so you could sit outside no matter which way the wind was blowing. Helena realized he was describing a specific house, one he had clearly spent time imagining. You have thought about this a lot. I have. He turned to face her, his expression serious. Helena, I know we have only been courting for a couple of months. I know you came here expecting to be alone, to live as a spinster schoolteacher, but I am hoping I can change your mind about that. Her heart began to pound. Graham, let me finish. He took her hands gently. I am not asking you to decide anything today. I am just asking you to think about the possibility of a future that includes me, includes us. I know you have been hurt and I know you are scared of trusting again. But I love you, Helena. I have loved you since I first saw you step off that stagecoach looking so determined and so sad. I want to build a life with you, here in this valley. I want to give you a home and a family and all the security and love you deserve. Tears streamed down Helena's face, but they were not tears of fear or pain. I do not know what to say. Say you will think about it. Say you will give us a chance. He raised one of her hands to his lips and kissed it gently. I am a patient man, Helena. I can wait as long as you need. I am afraid, she whispered. Afraid that something will go wrong, that you will change your mind, or I will disappoint you. Life does not come with guarantees, Graham said, but I can promise you this. I will never believe lies over your truth. I will never break a promise I make to you. And I will spend every day trying to make you happy. He reached up and cupped her face in his hands, his calloused palms warm against her skin. You are not damaged goods, Helena. You are not unworthy of love because of what someone else did to you. You are smart and kind and beautiful, and any man would be lucky to win your heart. Helena closed her eyes, feeling his words wash over her like a healing balm. For months, she had carried the weight of shame and rejection, had believed on some level that she was tainted by scandal even though she had done nothing wrong. But Graham saw her differently. He saw her clearly, without the filter of society's judgment or past pain. I love you too, she said, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. I have been fighting it, but I do. I love you, Graham. His smile was incandescent. Can I kiss you? Yes. He lowered his head slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but Helena stood on her toes to meet him halfway. Their lips touched softly at first, a gentle exploration that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. Then Graham's arms came around her, pulling her close, and the kiss deepened into something that spoke of longing and promise and hope. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Graham rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, Helena, please. I know it is fast, but out here, when you know, you know. Marry me and help me build our life in this valley. Every rational part of Helena's mind said it was too soon, that she should wait, that she needed to be careful. But her heart, her battered but still beating heart, knew the truth. Graham Everett was the answer to prayers she had been afraid to pray. He was safety and strength and patient, enduring kindness. Yes, she breathed. Yes, I will marry you. Graham let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around until they were both dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her again, and Helena felt the last of her walls crumble. She was not going to be alone forever. She was going to build a life with this good man, in this beautiful place, and the past could not touch her here. They spent the rest of the afternoon sitting by the creek, making plans and dreaming aloud. Graham wanted to start building the house in the spring, after the winter weather passed. He would continue working at the Circle T to earn money, but spend his free time on construction. Helena would keep teaching, at least for a while, saving her salary to help furnish their home. They talked about what the house should look like, how many rooms, where to put the barn and corrals. "I want children," Graham said at one point, his voice tentative. "If you do." "I know some women do not." "I do," Helena assured him. "I have always wanted children, a whole house full of them if we are blessed. Then we will fill that house with love and laughter and babies," Graham promised, kissing her again. As the sun began to set, they reluctantly mounted their horses and headed back to town. Helena felt as though she were floating, happiness bubbling up inside her like a spring. When they reached the boarding house, several people were sitting on their porches enjoying the evening, and Helena saw them notice Graham's arm around her waist, her flushed face, their obvious joy. Let them see, she thought. Let them talk. She had nothing to hide and nothing to fear anymore. Graham walked her to her door and kissed her one more time, lingeringly. "I will talk to Reverend Matthews tomorrow about posting the banns. How long of an engagement do you want?" "Not long," Helena said. "Maybe 6 weeks. That will give me time to make a dress and get a few things in order." 6 weeks, Graham agreed. "I will be counting every day." After he left, Helena went inside and sat on her bed, her mind reeling. She was going to be married, to a wonderful man who loved her. It seemed impossible, like a dream that would dissolve if she examined it too closely. But the memory of Graham's arms around her, his lips on hers, was solid and real. The next morning, Helena told Mrs. Patterson her news over breakfast. The older woman beamed. "Graham Everett is a fine young man. You have chosen well, my dear, and he has chosen well too. I could tell from the first time I saw you two together that there was something special there." At school, Helena found it hard to concentrate on lessons. Her mind kept drifting to Graham and their plans. But the children were forgiving, sensing her happiness even if they did not know the cause. After school, Margaret Peterson appeared at the schoolhouse door, slightly out of breath. "Is it true? Are you really engaged to Graham Everett?" Helena nodded, smiling. "He asked me yesterday. We are getting married in 6 weeks." Margaret let out a squeal and hugged her. "I am so happy for you both. This is wonderful news. You must let me help with the wedding preparations, and we will need to have a party to celebrate the engagement." Over the next few days, news of the engagement spread through Dodge City. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with many people stopping Helena on the street to offer congratulations. Even Beatrice Holloway managed a tight smile and a stiff wish for happiness, though her eyes remained skeptical. Graham came to town every evening after work, arriving dusty and tired but always with a smile for Helena. They would walk together or sit on the boarding house porch, talking and planning. Sometimes he brought small gifts, wildflowers, a length of pretty fabric he had seen at the general store, a book of poetry he thought she might like. Each gift was chosen with care, demonstrating how well he was coming to know her tastes and preferences. 3 weeks before the wedding, a letter arrived for Helena from Philadelphia. It was from her former friend, Constance Whitmore, one of the few people who had maintained contact after the scandal. Helena opened it with trembling hands, wondering what news could be important enough to prompt a letter. The contents made her gasp. Thomas Fairchild's business partner, the man who had spread the lies about Helena, had been arrested for embezzlement. In the process of investigating his finances, authorities had discovered that he had a pattern of pursuing young women, spreading vicious rumors about those who rejected him, and generally manipulating people for his own gain. Several other women had come forward with similar stories. Thomas Fairchild had apparently made a public statement acknowledging that he had wronged Helena, that she had been innocent of all charges, and expressing his deep regret for not believing her. Helena read the letter twice, then set it down with shaking hands. Vindication, after all these months. Proof that she had been telling the truth. But instead of triumph, she felt only a distant sadness for the girl she had been, the one who had cared desperately about Thomas Fairchild's opinion and Philadelphia society's approval. That evening, she showed the letter to Graham. He read it carefully, his jaw tight. "Do you want to go back, now that your name has been cleared?" "No," Helena said without hesitation. "That life is over. My life is here now with you." Graham's relief was palpable. He pulled her into his arms. "I am glad. Though I would have supported you if you had wanted to return. Your happiness is what matters most to me." "I am happy here," Helena assured him. "Happier than I ever was in Philadelphia. That place, those people, they are part of my past. But you are my future." The wedding preparations accelerated. Margaret and several other ranch wives helped Helena sew her wedding dress, a simple but elegant gown of cream-colored silk that Margaret had been saving for something special. The women gathered at the boarding house several evenings a week, sewing and chatting and sharing stories. Helena was touched by their kindness and their easy acceptance of her into their circle. Graham, meanwhile, was working on a surprise. He would not tell Helena what it was, only that she would find out on their wedding day. When she pressed him, he just smiled mysteriously and changed the subject. The night before the wedding, Helena could barely sleep. She lay in her narrow bed at the boarding house for the last time, thinking about everything that had changed since that hot July day when she had arrived in Dodge City. She had come expecting to live alone, to bury herself in work, and try to forget about love and companionship. Instead, she had found a man whose patient kindness had gradually won her trust and then her heart. Tomorrow, she would become his wife, and they would begin building a life together. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, an unseasonably warm day in early November. The church was full of townspeople and ranching families, all dressed in their best clothes. Helena dressed in her new gown with Margaret's help, her hands trembling slightly as she pinned up her hair and tucked a few late-blooming wildflowers into the simple arrangement. "You look beautiful," Margaret said, tears in her eyes. "Graham is a lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Helena replied. John Peterson drove her to the church in a wagon decorated with ribbons and fall leaves. As they approached, Helena saw Graham standing outside the church doors, talking with his ranch boss and looking nervous. He wore a new black suit, and his hair was neatly trimmed. When he saw her, his entire face lit up with such love and joy that Helena felt tears prick her own eyes. John helped her down from the wagon, and Graham came forward to take her hand. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," he said softly. "You look very handsome yourself," Helena replied, smiling through her tears. They walked into the church together, and the ceremony began. Reverend Matthews spoke about love and commitment, about building a life together through good times and bad. Helena barely heard the words, too focused on Graham's hand in hers, the solid reality of his presence beside her. When it came time for vows, Graham's voice was strong and clear. "I, Graham Everett, take you, Helena Kimball, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you all the days of my life. I promise to be faithful in good times and bad, in sickness and in health. I promise to be patient when you need time, strong when you need support, and gentle when you need comfort. You are my heart, Helena, and I will spend my life proving myself worthy of you." Helena's voice shook as she responded with her own vows, promising to love and honor Graham, to stand beside him through whatever challenges life brought, to build a home and a family with him. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Graham pulled her into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, to the cheers and laughter of the assembled guests. The reception was held in the community hall, with food and music and dancing. Helena was embraced by what felt like half of Dodge City, all offering congratulations and best wishes. Graham never left her side, his hand always at the small of her back or holding hers, as though he needed the constant physical reassurance that she was real and truly his. As the afternoon wore on, Graham leaned down and whispered in her ear, "Are you ready to see your surprise?" "I have been wondering all day," Helena admitted. They slipped away from the party and walked to where Graham's wagon waited, packed with some of Helena's belongings and supplies. But instead of heading toward the Circle T ranch or back to town, Graham drove east toward his land. As they crested the rise and the valley came into view, Helena gasped. Where there had been only empty prairie before, now stood the frame of a house. The basic structure was up, walls and roof, though it was clearly unfinished. "I have been working on it every spare minute for the past month," Graham explained, his voice uncertain. "It is not done yet, not by a long shot. But I wanted us to spend our wedding night in our own home, even if it is just a shell right now. I set up a tent inside to keep out the wind, and I brought blankets and supplies. If you would rather stay in town tonight, we can, but I thought—" "It is perfect," Helena interrupted, tears streaming down her face. "Graham, it is absolutely perfect." He helped her down from the wagon and led her inside. True to his word, he had set up a large tent within the framework of the house, creating a cozy space complete with a camp bed, blankets, and even a small stove for warmth and cooking. Lanterns provided soft light, and he had clearly gone to great effort to make it as comfortable as possible. "Welcome home, Mrs. Everett," Graham said softly, pulling her into his arms. Helena wrapped her arms around his neck, her heart full to bursting. "I love you so much. I love you too. More than I knew it was possible to love someone." That night, in the skeleton of the house that would become their home, Graham and Helena began their life together as husband and wife. Graham was gentle and patient, taking time to ensure Helena felt safe and cherished. There was passion, yes, but also tenderness and laughter, and the sweet joy of finally being able to express their love fully. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the blankets, listening to the wind whisper across the prairie and making plans for their future. "I want to finish the house by spring," Graham said, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on Helena's shoulder. "That way we will be settled in before the busy season starts." "I can help," Helena offered. "I am stronger than I look. I know you are." He kissed the top of her head. "You are the strongest person I know, Helena. To have gone through what you did and still be able to open your heart again, that takes real courage. You made it possible," she said. "Your patient kindness, Graham, that is what won me." Not grand gestures or pretty words, just steady, reliable kindness. "You showed me that I could trust again." "I will spend my life being worthy of that trust," Graham promised. They spent 3 days in their unfinished house, living like pioneers and loving every minute of it. Graham showed Helena all over the property, pointing out where he planned to build the barn, where the garden would go, where they might plant an orchard someday. Helena caught his vision, adding her own ideas and suggestions. It was their land, their future, and they would build it together. On the 4th day, they returned to town so Helena could finish out the school term. Graham had arranged for them to stay in a small house owned by the Circle T, located about halfway between the ranch and town. It was tiny but comfortable, and Helena threw herself into making it feel like home while still teaching her students and helping Graham with the new house on weekends. Winter came early that year, with snow falling in mid-November and temperatures dropping sharply. Construction on the house had to stop, but Graham and Helena used the time to plan every detail of the interior layout and to save money for supplies. They spent their evenings by the fire in the little house, Graham working on tack repair or reading while Helena graded papers or sewed curtains for their future home. Helena discovered she was expecting a baby in December, just 6 weeks after their wedding. Graham was overjoyed, immediately becoming even more protective and attentive than before. Helena felt wonderful, no sickness or discomfort, just a deep sense of contentment that grew along with the new life inside her. "A baby," Graham kept saying, shaking his head in wonder. "We are going to have a baby. Are you hoping for a boy or a girl?" Helena asked one evening as they lay in bed, Graham's hand resting on her still flat stomach. "I do not care, as long as the baby is healthy and you come through the birth safely," he said. "Though I suppose a boy would be helpful eventually, for ranch work. And a girl would be helpful with the house and garden," Helena countered with a smile. "Really, we should just plan on having several of each." Graham laughed and pulled her closer. "However many we are blessed with, I will love them all, but none of them will ever be as precious to me as their mother." Christmas was a joyful affair. They spent the day with the Petersons and several other ranching families, sharing food and gifts and stories. Helena felt surrounded by love and acceptance in a way she had never experienced, even in her own family. These people had welcomed her despite knowing nothing about her past, had judged her on her own merits rather than on gossip or scandal. Winter slowly gave way to spring. As soon as the ground thawed, Graham resumed work on the house with renewed vigor. Helena could no longer help with the heavy construction, her pregnancy now obvious, but she worked on finishing touches like painting and staining. Other ranchers and cowboys came to help on their days off, and the house began to take shape. By late April, it was finished enough to move into. 4 rooms downstairs, including a generous kitchen and sitting room, 2 bedrooms upstairs, and that wraparound porch Graham had promised. They moved in on a sunny day in May, with help from half the county. Women brought furniture and linens and kitchen supplies, while men carried in the heavier pieces. By evening, the house was more or less settled, and Helena stood in the kitchen looking around at her new home with tears in her eyes. "Happy?" Graham asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her expanded waist. "So happy I do not have words for it," Helena said. "A year ago I thought my life was over. I thought I would never have a home or a family or anyone to love. And now look at us." "God has a way of working things out," Graham said. "Even when we cannot see the path, He knows where we are supposed to end up." Helena turned in his arms to face him. "I ended up exactly where I was supposed to be. With you." Their son was born in mid-July, delivered with the help of Margaret Peterson and the town doctor in the upstairs bedroom of their new home. The labor was long and difficult, but Helena came through it strong, and the baby was healthy and perfect. They named him Nathan, after Graham's father, and he had his mother's green eyes and his father's strong chin. Graham was besotted from the first moment he held his son, cradling the tiny bundle with a gentleness that belied his calloused hands and rough appearance. "He is perfect," he kept saying. "Helena, you are amazing. Thank you for this gift." Helena watched her husband with their newborn son and felt her heart expand even further. How had she gotten so lucky? How had she gone from being alone and broken to having this beautiful family, this wonderful life? The years that followed were full and rich. Helena taught for 1 more year after Nathan's birth, then resigned to focus on the ranch and her growing family. A daughter, Lily, arrived 2 years after Nathan, followed by another son, Samuel, and then another daughter, Rose. The house that had seemed so large when they first moved in became filled with the sound of children's laughter and running feet. Graham built their cattle operation slowly but surely, earning a reputation for honest dealing and quality stock. He hired a few cowboys to help with the work, and the ranch prospered. Helena tended a large garden, kept chickens, and became known throughout the area for her preserves and baked goods. But more than that, she created a home where love was the foundation of everything. Their children grew strong and healthy, educated by their mother and trained in ranch work by their father. Nathan showed an early aptitude for handling cattle and horses. Lily was gentle and artistic, always drawing or making things with her hands. Samuel was the adventurous one, constantly exploring and getting into scrapes. And Rose, the baby, was sunshine itself, bringing joy wherever she went. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Graham and Helena stood on the porch of their home watching the sun set over the prairie. The children were all in bed, the house was quiet, and they had a rare moment of peace. "You ever think about Philadelphia?" Graham asked, his arm around Helena's shoulders. "Sometimes," Helena admitted, "but only as something that happened to someone else in another life. This is who I am now. This is home." "I am glad you stepped off that stagecoach 10 years ago," Graham said. "I am glad you gave me a chance to prove that not all men are like the ones who hurt you." "You did not just prove it," Helena said, turning to face him. "You showed me what real love looks like. Patient and kind and steady. You never gave up on me, even when I was too scared to accept what you were offering." "I would wait 100 years for you," Graham said, kissing her softly. "You were worth every moment of patience." They stood together as darkness fell, two people who had found each other against the odds and built something beautiful. Helena thought about the frightened, broken woman who had arrived in Dodge City a decade ago, certain she would spend her life alone. She thought about the cowboy who had seen past her walls to the person underneath and had been willing to wait as long as it took for her to trust again. "Thank you," she whispered against Graham's chest. "For what?" "For proving me wrong. I thought I would be alone forever. But you showed me I could have this, all of this. A home, a family, love that lasts." Graham tightened his arms around her. "You were never meant to be alone, Helena. You were meant to be here with me, building this life together." They went inside eventually, closing the door on the night and retreating to the warmth of their bedroom. Outside, the prairie stretched endlessly under the stars, wild and beautiful and full of possibility. Inside, 4 children slept peacefully in their beds, safe and loved. And in the master bedroom, 2 people who had found each other at exactly the right moment held each other close, grateful for every day they had been given together. Years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Nathan grew into a tall, serious young man who took his responsibilities on the ranch seriously. At 18, he was already talking about filing his own land claim and starting his own operation, though Graham and Helena knew they had a few more years with him yet. Lily, at 16, was becoming a beautiful young woman with a talent for sketching that had caught the attention of a traveling art teacher who passed through Dodge City. Samuel, 14, was still getting into trouble but showing signs of settling down into the kind of steady reliability that characterized his father. And Rose, at 12, remained the family's ray of sunshine, always ready with a smile or a hug. The ranch had prospered beyond Graham's early dreams. They now ran 2,000 head of cattle and employed 6 full-time cowboys plus seasonal help during roundup and drives. The house had been expanded twice to accommodate the growing family and occasional guests. Helena had added touches of civilization throughout, with curtains and rugs and the piano Graham had surprised her with on their 5th anniversary. Dodge City itself had grown and changed. The wild cowtown atmosphere was fading as more families settled in the area and law became more established. The school now had 3 teachers, and the town boasted a library, several churches, and numerous businesses. Helena served on the school board and was active in the church, respected throughout the community not just as Graham Everett's wife, but as a woman of intelligence and compassion in her own right. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sun set, a familiar ritual after all these years, Graham turned to Helena with a thoughtful expression. "Do you remember the day we met? When you stepped off that stagecoach looking so determined and so lost at the same time?" Helena smiled, her hand finding his. I remember thinking I had made a terrible mistake coming out here, that I would never fit in or find a place for myself." "I knew right then," Graham said. "The moment I saw you, something in me just recognized you, if that makes any sense. I knew I was going to love you even before I knew your name." "It does make sense," Helena said softly, "though it took me longer to understand what I was feeling. I was so determined to protect myself, to never trust anyone again. But you did trust me eventually." Graham brought her hand to his lips. "That is the thing I am most proud of in my life, Helena, not the ranch or the cattle or anything else, just that you trusted me enough to let me love you." Helena felt tears prick her eyes, even after all these years, moved by his words. "You made it easy, Graham. You never demanded anything. You just kept showing up, being kind, giving me space to heal at my own pace." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of evening. From inside the house came the murmur of their children's voices as they finished their evening chores and prepared for bed. In the distance, cattle lowed softly, and a coyote called to its mate. "Nathan asked me today about filing a claim," Graham said eventually. "He has his eye on that section to the north of us, the one with the spring." "He is so young," Helena said, though she had known this day was coming. "He is the same age I was when I started working toward my own place," Graham reminded her, "and he has a good head on his shoulders. Plus, he would be close enough to help out here when we need him." "I know. I just hate to see him grow up so fast. They all are growing up so fast." Graham pulled her closer. "That is what we raised them for, though, to be strong enough and smart enough to build their own lives. We gave them a foundation, Helena. Now we have to trust that foundation will hold." Helena nodded, knowing he was right but still feeling the bittersweet ache of watching children become adults. "What about Lily? She has been talking more about that art school in Chicago." "If that is what she wants, we will find a way to make it happen," Graham said firmly. "I never want our children to feel like they have to choose between their dreams and our approval. We chose this life, but they should be free to choose their own paths." It was one of the things Helena loved most about Graham, his willingness to support their children even when it meant letting them go. He wanted them to be happy and fulfilled, not just dutiful. As full darkness fell, they went inside to say goodnight to the children. Nathan was in his room, studying ranch management books by lamplight. Lily was sketching in her journal, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. Samuel and Rose were playing checkers in the sitting room, arguing good-naturedly about the rules. After tucking in the younger two and saying goodnight to the older ones, Graham and Helena retired to their own room. It was their sanctuary, decorated simply but comfortably, with the large bed Graham had built by hand in their second year of marriage, and the quilt Helena had pieced together from scraps of their children's baby clothes. "You ever regret it?" Helena asked as they prepared for bed. "Marrying me, I mean. Taking on a woman with a scandal in her past." Graham turned to look at her, genuine surprise on his face. "Not for one single moment. Helena, You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children and this life we have built together. That is everything I ever wanted and more than I knew to hope for. Even though people talked at first, even though Mrs. Holloway and her friends tried to make trouble. Especially because of that, Graham said, coming to stand in front of her. He took both her hands in his. Those people do not matter, Helena. They never did. What matters is us, our family, the life we have created together. Everything else is just noise. Helena leaned into him, breathing in the familiar scent of soap and sunshine and the particular smell that was uniquely Graham. After all these years, he could still make her feel safe and cherished with just his presence. I love you, she said, more now than even on our wedding day. I did not think that was possible, but it is. Every year with you, every moment, just makes me love you more. That is exactly how I feel, Graham said, tilting her chin up so he could kiss her. Like my heart keeps expanding to hold more and more love for you. That night, they made love with the easy familiarity of long marriage, but also with the passion that had never dimmed between them. Afterward, lying in each other's arms in the darkness, Helena reflected on how far she had come from that frightened woman on the stagecoach. She had arrived in Dodge City thinking she would be alone forever, her heart too broken to risk loving again. But Graham had proven her wrong with his patient kindness. He had not rushed her or pressured her. He had simply been there, steady and reliable, until she felt safe enough to open her heart again. And in doing so, he had given her everything she thought she had lost: love, family, belonging, and a future full of hope. The ranch continued to thrive over the following years. Nathan did file his claim and began building his own small operation with his father's help and guidance. At 21, he married a girl from a neighboring ranch, a sensible young woman named Sarah who fit seamlessly into the family. Graham and Helena became grandparents when Nathan and Sarah's first child, a daughter, was born. And Helena found that her heart somehow had room to expand even further. Lily did go to Chicago to study art, and though Helena missed her terribly, she was proud of her daughter's courage in pursuing her dreams. Lily sent letters every week, full of descriptions of the city and her classes and the amazing things she was learning. She came home for summers, bringing sketches and paintings that amazed the whole family. Samuel proved to be a natural horseman, developing a reputation throughout Kansas for his skill in training and handling difficult horses. At 19, he was already being sought out by ranchers across the state. Rose, blossoming into a young woman, showed an interest in teaching like her mother and talked about going to normal school to earn her certificate. Graham and Helena, now in their 40s, watched it all with a mixture of pride and wonder. Their children were becoming the people they were meant to be, each finding their own path while still maintaining strong ties to family and home. The ranch was secure, their marriage was as strong as ever, and life was good. One autumn afternoon, as Helena worked in her garden harvesting the last of the vegetables before the first frost, she heard a wagon approaching. Looking up, she saw an unfamiliar vehicle coming up the lane. As it drew closer, she recognized the passenger, Beatrice Holloway, looking considerably older than when Helena had last seen her up close. Helena wiped her hands on her apron and walked to meet the wagon. To her surprise, Mrs. Holloway asked the driver to help her down. "Mrs. Everett," Beatrice said formally, "I wonder if I might have a word with you." "Of course," Helena said, curious. "Would you like to come inside? I can make some tea." They went into the house, and Helena put the kettle on while Beatrice sat stiffly at the kitchen table. When the tea was ready, Helena poured 2 cups and sat down across from her unexpected guest. "I suppose you are wondering why I am here," Beatrice said, not meeting Helena's eyes. "I admit I am curious," Helena said gently. Beatrice took a breath. "I came to apologize for the way I treated you when you first came to Dodge City, for the things I said and the judgments I made without knowing you or the truth of your situation." Helena was stunned into silence. "I recently learned some things about my own past that made me realize how wrong I was," Beatrice continued, her voice shaking slightly. "Things about my late husband, about choices he made that I never knew about. And it made me understand that we never really know what people are dealing with, what burdens they carry. I was cruel to you, Mrs. Everett, and I am deeply sorry." Helena reached across the table and took Beatrice's hand. "I forgive you, Mrs. Holloway. I forgave you years ago, actually. I realized that your judgment said more about your own fears than anything about me." Beatrice looked up, tears in her eyes. "You are a much better person than I am." "I do not think that is true," Helena said. "We are all just doing the best we can with what we know at the time. And you are here now, making this right. That takes courage." They talked for another hour, and by the time Beatrice left, something like friendship had begun to form between them. Helena watched the wagon roll away, marveling at the unexpected turn of events. She had never expected an apology, had long ago made peace with the fact that some people would never understand or accept her. But this gesture of reconciliation felt like the final piece of her healing, the closing of a circle that had begun that day on the stagecoach so many years ago. When Graham came in for supper that evening, Helena told him about Beatrice's visit. He shook his head in amazement. "That woman has a lot of nerve, showing up here after all these years." "No, it was brave," Helena corrected gently. "Admitting you were wrong, asking forgiveness, that is one of the hardest things a person can do. I respect her for it." Graham pulled her into his arms. "This is why I love you. You have every right to be bitter, to hold grudges, but instead you choose forgiveness and understanding. You make me want to be a better man, Helena." "You already are the best man I know," Helena said, standing on her toes to kiss him. "You proved that to me a long time ago, and you prove it again every single day." As winter settled over the prairie that year, the Everett family gathered frequently around the fire in the big sitting room. Nathan and Sarah brought the baby to visit often. Lily came home for Christmas, full of stories about her life in Chicago. Samuel was always there for Sunday dinners, and Rose, still at home, kept everyone entertained with her cheerful chatter. On Christmas Eve, after the younger children had gone to bed and Lily, Nathan, and Samuel sat by the fire with their parents, Graham raised his glass in a toast. "To family," he said, "to the past that brought us together and the future we are building, and especially to your mother, who took a chance on a dusty cowboy and made all of this possible." "To Mama," the children chorused, raising their own glasses. Helena felt tears threatening but blinked them back, smiling around at the faces of the people she loved most in the world. "To all of you," she said. "You are my greatest blessing, each and every one." Later that night, as she and Graham prepared for bed, Helena paused at the window to look out over the snow-covered prairie. The moon was nearly full, painting everything in silver light. From this window, she could see the barn, the corrals, the outbuildings, all the physical evidence of the life they had built together. But the real wealth was inside this house. The love, the laughter, the connections that bound them all together. "What are you thinking?" Graham asked, coming to stand behind her and wrap his arms around her waist. "I am thinking about how wrong I was," Helena said. "That day I arrived here, I thought love was something that had been taken from me forever. I thought I would spend my life alone, teaching other people's children and trying to be content with that. I could not have been more wrong." "I am glad you were wrong," Graham said, resting his chin on top of her head. "I am glad I got to prove to you that you could trust again, that you could love again. You did more than that, Helena said, turning in his arms to face him. You showed me what real love looks like. Not the shallow infatuation I felt for Thomas Fairchild, but deep, abiding love that grows stronger with time. Love that is built on respect and friendship and shared dreams. Love that lasts. We built that together, Graham reminded her. You could have refused to let me court you. You could have kept your walls up forever, but you chose to be brave. You chose to risk your heart again. That is what made all of this possible. They stood together in the moonlight, two people who had found each other at exactly the right time in exactly the right place. Helena thought about the path that had led her here, all the pain and heartbreak that had seemed unbearable at the time but had ultimately brought her to this moment, to this man, to this life. I would not change anything, she said softly, even the hard parts, because they led me here to you. I love you, Helena Everett, Graham said. Today, tomorrow, and every day after that until I draw my last breath. And I love you, Helena replied. My patient, kind cowboy who proved that fairy tales can come true, even on the frontier. They went to bed that night wrapped in each other's arms, as they had been for over 20 years and would be for all the years to come. Outside, snow fell gently on the prairie, covering everything in a blanket of white. Inside, a family slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and safe. Helena's story had begun with heartbreak and ended with joy. She had arrived in Dodge City thinking she would be alone forever, her heart too damaged to risk loving again. But Graham Everett, with his patient kindness and steadfast love, had proven her gloriously wrong. He had waited for her to heal, had given her space to learn to trust again, and had shown her that not all men were like the ones who had hurt her. Together, they had built something beautiful, a ranch, a family, a life full of love and purpose. They had raised children who were strong and kind and ready to make their own marks on the world. They had created a home that was a refuge and a gathering place, filled with laughter and warmth. And through it all, through the hard times and the good times, through the challenges and the triumphs, their love had remained constant. It had grown and deepened, becoming the foundation upon which everything else was built. Years later, when Helena was an old woman sitting on that same porch with Graham's hand in hers, watching their grandchildren play in the yard, she would think back to that scared young woman on the stagecoach and marvel at the journey. She would remember the patient cowboy who had seen past her walls to the woman underneath, and had loved her faithfully through all the years of their lives together. No regrets, Graham would ask, his voice thin with age but still warm with love. Not a single one, Helena would reply, squeezing his hand. You proved me wrong about being alone, and I will be grateful for that every day for the rest of my life. And on that porch, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and deeply loved, two people who had found each other against all odds would sit in contentment, knowing that their love story was one for the ages. A story of patience and kindness, of healing and hope, of a woman who thought she would be alone forever, and the cowboy who proved her wrong with every gentle word and tender action. Their legacy would live on in their children and grandchildren, in the ranch they had built, in the community they had helped shape. But most of all, it would live on in the example they set of what true love looked like, patient, kind, enduring, and infinitely precious. The end.